and welcome to Tutorial 9, Batch Processing of Splines. If you have not yet seen the tutorial on splines and other spline editing, please see previous tutorial on it. So, today we are going to set up splines for batch processing. As usual, we can go into the Edit Splines dialog to bring it up, and similarly to how it is shown in the previous tutorial, we will go through that process. We will use the defaults, which gives us these splines here. We can go to keyframes, select the first of which. Let's set up the min or the roof first. Let's probably find where it is. Set up the min tongue. The layout of this tutorial will follow a slightly unconventional format. Because the software regarding batch processing of Splines is relatively new, I will have to explain some things which you must do to ensure that your data is correctly batch processed. So, now that we have set up that one, we can go to the tongue, best fit it, and wait. There we go. We will just do a manual correction here. So, now that we have done this, we can return to Splines, click the Advanced button, and then this gives us this Template tab at the top, which is a new addition in the latest version of Articulate Assistant Advanced. These two buttons correspond to saving only the currently selected fan spline and all of them. As we have just set them up, we will use all. We can give it a title, which then saves it here. Click OK. And now if we go to the new Batch Processing tab, we can choose to use our template that we have set up. All templates that you save using the Splines Advanced are saved into the AAA directory, and so you can browse for them or type in their file path here. The settings which you can find are very similar to those as they appear in keyframes, with these two sections being exactly the same. Their function is slightly different in batch. So, for example, the best fit button, if it were used with the batch processing, would mean that for each video frame or ultrasonic frame, it would then apply a best fit. Whereas track, what it would do would be that it would apply a best fit to the first frame and then snap to fit to the previous frame for each frame, similar to the normal track function. If you are using a very large amount of data, it is recommended to not use best fit, as the time it would take to process would be extremely large. In such circumstances, fast fit may be an acceptable approximation. Similarly, snap to fit, as being similar to best fit when used with batch, will not snap to fit to the previous frame as track does, but will snap to fit to your template for each frame for all data. So, the recommended settings, which most users should use unless they have good reason otherwise, is to use every nth video frame set to 1 and to use track. The smooth checkbox should always be checked to ensure that the resulting splines have a nice curve to them and are not jagged in appearance. When this is done, you can select which recordings and clients you would like to have the batch process apply to. The Change Filter tab is available, which is the same filter as discussed in previous tutorials. One very, very important thing to remember at this point is that the batch process will generate an error and cease to run if you include in the list of batch processed recordings any which do not contain ultrasonics, echo B, or video data. So for example, if I were to include a recording from the WS client, which is available in the demo version of AAA, that client does not have associated ultrasonics or echo B data. As such, if any of the recordings were present in this list, batch process would not function properly. So the filters that I have used are to go with the current client, which means that because in the case of the demo file here, I know that the client has only ultrasonics and echo B data, I can safely filter by that. So now that this is done, we can click Batch Process, and this will take a considerable amount of time, including setting it up before it even begins to run. Batch Process is different to other functions of spline editing in that it will always save during every single frame. As a result, you must ensure that if you have data already present regarding splines, that this will overwrite it or create the data on top. Furthermore, subsequent batch processes which are run without deleting old batch process data results will cause many iterations of batch process data to be recorded over the top of one another, resulting in several overlapping splines, which can be very difficult to identify and to determine which are the necessary ones to delete. As such, I highly, highly recommend that before you run any batch process, you delete all existing splines for all clients for which you wish to run the batch process. If you wish to stop a batch process, you can press the stop button, which will safely abort the procedure and ensure that the data which has so far been generated in the batch process will be saved. As such, because the saving happens automatically with each frame, discard changes will not remove any new additions to the splines generated using the batch process. So if we wish to run another batch process, having decided that we did not like the results of our present batch process, we can return to the Edit Splines dialog. Under the Splines tab, we can delete all of our splines that were generated in a batch process by repeatedly hitting the Delete button. This will then ensure that there are no splines in place to interfere with a new batch process. This concludes batch processing tutorial. If you would like to know more about fitting splines to your data, please see the previous tutorial on splines.